Well, back in January last year, one of Australia's most famous pieces of art was defaced by climate activists. Frederick McCubbin's Down on His Luck, which is 135 years old and valued at well over $3 million, was on display at the Art Gallery of West Australia. Climate protesters attacked the piece of art, spray painting the Woodside Oil Company's logo on the perspex glass that was protecting the painting. Now, one of the vandals, who was employed as the Greens National's communications officer, was convicted of criminal damage and fined $2,000, as well as being ordered to pay $5,000 in damages to the art gallery. But get this, now we discover that the West Australian Museum has acquired the vandalised perspex screen, claiming it's an important part of Australian history. And the vandal now says the museum's decision to regard her vandalism as historic means her actions were legitimate. Joining me is Liberal MP Garth Hamilton and Liz Storer from The Late Debate here on Sky News Monday to Thursday at 10 p.m. Liz, I don't see how this decision by the West Australian Museum does anything but convince these green idiots to go and spray paint even more works of art.
Well, as long as they have a lazy 7K to give to the state for the honour, James, if anything, the state could be seeing this as some sort of weird revenue raising. They get 2K for nothing, their museum gets 5K, and we all know a piece of perspex doesn't cost $5,000. But what I think is important here is a differentiation between an art gallery and a museum. So the chief exec at this museum has said this acquisition is not indicative of support for the cause whatsoever. They are simply doing what museums do, and that is to record issues affecting society, events happening as they happen. You may recall back in 2020, museums around the US were snaffling up memorabilia from the Black Lives Matter protests, and they burnt countless buildings to the ground in several cities. But this is what museums do. You can talk about the Vietnam War protests. There's masses of memorabilia in museums all around America. Name any protest, you're going to find bits and pieces. And I guess they're just looking to the future and going, well, one day this may be historic. It's important to note this piece of perspex is not on display. We're told there's no plans to put it on display. The downside is, like you say, we know that this has increasingly inflated already the massively overinflated sense of self-importance these protesters have. And we know that because she told us so. So they love this because they see themselves as history makers in the making. And that is what this move validates, which naturally we all groan and roll our eyes at.
Well, Garth, I hear what Liz is saying about museums collecting history, but the last thing Liz said is absolutely correct. By doing that, they've now validated the actions of these people. Surely most Australians would say to the museum, give me a break. We're not collecting this sort of rubbish.
Absolutely. And I'd imagine that most of the donors in WA, which is where a lot of the source of funds go to that particular museum, where they come from, they're all making their money out of the resources industry, out of the oil and gas industry. The people who are being demonised by these green activists. And I think what we're seeing here is what we see with a lot of the elites. They're happy to take the money from the people who do the hard work, the people in the blue-collar shirts out on the mine with a bit of dirt underneath their fingernails, a bit of oil on their skin. They're happy to take their money, but they align themselves at every possible opportunity with the small vocal minority who want to tear things down. For 135 years, that beautiful painting has gone through so many changes in the world. Think about all the changes and all the strife that's happened, all the conflict that's happened. But for some reason, these green activists think that they're the ones who get to attack it. They're the ones who get to try to deface it. Thankfully, there was that screen there. I think we should be calling these people out for what they are. They're very small-minded, very self-conscious. They think that they're so important. These green activists, they're not. They'll be forgotten by history, whether this thing's acquired or not. In another 35 years' time, they won't even be a footnote that we'll think about.
Well, you know, it may not be the end of this because I think Woodside provide a fair bit of money to the WA Museum. So we'll see whether Woodside are happy to keep donating their funds, knowing that that item has been collected by the museum that they're helping to pay for. Let's go to the US, where Donald Trump seems well and truly on track to win this election. That, of course, means the Democrats are getting absolutely desperate Trump's former White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, has come out and said that Trump praised Adolf Hitler and that Trump prefers the dictator approach to government. And so the Democrats, of course, have had a field day with this. Have a look.
This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist.
And the White House, well, they were pretty quick to jump on the bandwagon as well.
You have heard from this president over and over again about the threats to democracy, and the president has spoken about that. You've heard from the former president himself saying that he is going to be a dictator on day one. This is him, not us. This is him. And it's not just us, the White House, saying this. You've heard it from officials, former officials that worked for the former president, say this as well. So, you know, do we agree? I know that the vice president just spoke about this. Do we agree about that determination? Yes, we do.
Liz, a threat to democracy, a dictator from day one, a Hitler. We've already had 3 assassination attempts. Calling Trump Hitler and a fascist, they're practically goading someone to take another shot at Trump.
And with the amount of nut jobs that are fierce Democrat fans, it is genuinely a concern. But let's pay attention to this morsel of hearsay from this guy, Kelly, who Trump he wrote on his own platform, Truth Social, just last year, I couldn't stand the guy. He was one of my dumbest military minds ever, and I fired him like a dog. So we are listening to this guy who has massive sour grapes against Trump. It's on the public record. They had a fraught relationship, and here he is coming out 2 seconds to midnight making these claims, which the Trump campaign have denied very thoroughly, saying, oh, he's a fascist, he wants to be a dictator like Trump. It is sheer nonsense, but it speaks to how desperate the Dems are right now to be taking any tiny morsel that they can get, be it hearsay or if they have to make it up themselves, to besmirch Donald Trump.
Yeah, Garth, just 48 hours ago, Barack Obama was bemoaning the fact that, you know, the conversation's become so toxic and bitter. And here they are now calling Trump a fascist and he's going to be a dictator and he loves Adolf Hitler.
Well, look, I tend not to get myself drawn too far into American domestic politics. But if you find this distasteful, these personal attacks, get used to them, because this is exactly the tactic that Mr. Albanese is going to deploy, according to the papers this week, in the coming election against Peter Dutton. He's got his Get Dutton campaign, where he's going to personally besmirch Peter in exactly the same way we're sort of hearing here, trying to tear a man down, making all of their campaign not about policy, not about the things that they will do for the Australian people, but a direct attack on Peter's character. And I think that's going to fail terribly, because these attacks are exactly what they look like. They are poor and pathetic. And when applied to someone with the moral standing of Peter Dutton, I think the Australian people will see through that.
Garth Hamilton, Liz Storer, thanks so much for your time.